Hi, everyone. I'm Diane.
I'm Capriana.
Welcome to Dose of Unity. And we are here today. We're going to be talking about sex trafficking, human trafficking again. This is our second part. We had part one with our very first podcast that we did. And there's just so much there that we really wanted to go deeper. And, that was a topic that we had a lot of comments on, and people just have a lot of questions. So I'm just going to recap a bit about what we talked about the last time. We talked about how sex trafficking can happen. And I'm saying sex trafficking as opposed to human trafficking in this conversation, because that is really what we're talking about, just to be clear. And obviously with human trafficking, it relates to labor and things like that, labor laws and people working and being forced to work and not get paid and things like that. But we are definitely talking more about sexual exploitation and sex trafficking. But we talked about how it can happen, some of the ways you can prevent from being trafficked. One of the big things we talked about, was social media and not engaging with anybody you don't know, not being too open on socials, knowing who you're friends with, things like that. And we also talked about how you can help someone who's been a victim of trafficking. And we talked about the different ways that somebody who's being trafficked could potentially get help. One of the ways that I had shared is if you just like collapse and need to go to the emergency room personnel are trained to try to get you help right away. But we are going to talk this time a bit more about why people don't report when they have been victims of trafficking. We'll talk a bit more about the demand side of it. That's a big one. And we're going to incorporate some of the stories that we have heard from some of the people who've been victimized as we've talked to them. Capriana and I have talked to them in preparation for all the work we've done on this. We've put in hundreds of hours of work talking to all the different levels of people involved in this topic, from FBI and police to people who work directly with the people who've been trafficked, as well as victims themselves. So we're going to go ahead and get started. And so let's talk about why they don't report. So Capriana, I'm going to let you just start with this, and then we'll kind of continue our conversation. But one of the most obvious reasons they don't report, but go ahead and share with us.
I mean, there's plenty of reasons someone might not report, from just flat out being scared, being threatened. A lot of times there will be threats made against the individual or their family members or their children. Lots of different ways that someone can scare someone into not reporting. Then you also have an effect where they're at this point mentally where they identify with their trafficker. They're not sure that they're no longer believing that they're trafficked. They think that this is their boyfriend. Oh, that's just how he is, or whatever. Oh my gosh, they might feel like this is the only way that they can stay afloat and survive. This trafficker is providing them food or shelter or something that they need. They don't feel like they can provide that for themselves. Mm-hmm. And then, there's people who might feel that they want to be in this situation, that they feel like it's their choice, but it's not really their choice. They're just again, in this mental state where they're, it's pure survival. So Diane, I mean, what are some other ways that I didn't mention? Those are the most glaring, I know, that we've identified. So what are maybe the more nuanced ones?
Yeah. And everything you had mentioned is exactly it. And a lot of people just don't understand why doesn't she get out, or they think about all these different scenarios. And I think that what I've heard too, in addition to what you had shared, is we touched on this a little bit the last time, is if they have been brainwashed essentially, or told over and over and over that the police can't help you, nobody cares about people like you're just a prostitute, you'll get arrested, all of those things. And then in addition to that, I've heard from victims, as well as from our conversations with the FBI as well, it's really hard too, because like you were saying, the threats, if they do report and they have to go and testify, they're put on the stand to, they're being put on the stand to defend themselves. And that's terrifying anyway, when you have the trafficker who could be in the courtroom with you, and they try to diminish everything about the person, so they're really, really slick at, well, look at her, she doesn't make any sense, she's a drug addict, she's a prostitute, like she's crazy. And unfortunately, when somebody is in a situation that they have to face their trafficker in court, if they get that far, it's very terrifying. And the other thing I think, as I talk to different people, I hear about how they have a hard time, the victims often have a hard time articulating, what's going on and what has happened to them. And something that I think a lot of people overlook is they've often had traumatic brain injuries as well, with how they have been treated and if they have been abused. And so when you add all this up, and you are in a court situation where you're trying to address all of this, it's very, very scary. And I think the reason I'm bringing this up is for judges and for attorneys and people to understand what you see, is you have to really look carefully and understand the whole picture, and really be trained on what to look for in order to make sure that that person who's been victimized is safe in their in court, in their testimony. And then the other thing too is it's similar to if somebody has been a victim of rape. The statistic that I had read was 20%, only 20% of rape is reported for the same reason. It's apparently gone up a little bit. Dana from Rape Crisis Center has said that it's gone up to 33% as of since the whole Me Too movement. So the reporting has increased. So I think the other part of it too, from a statistical perspective, when people are wondering about, what are the numbers as far as how many people have been trafficked, or if there is a situation where people are talking about somebody who's being trafficked and it's police, it kind of is like, if the police don't know about it, it doesn't happen, is kind of the mentality I've heard sometimes. And I want to challenge that to say, actually, it doesn't mean it didn't happen. It just means it wasn't reported for all of these reasons we're talking about. But so yeah, anything more on that particular part of it that you want to share?
No, I mean, I think we touched on most things. I know that it can be even bigger sometimes than we know, as far as like a particular trafficker working with a network of other people, which is, something that's even scarier. So they don't trust other people, even when they are able to report. They don't know who's, they get into these situations where they're in these shelters or they're in these places. They don't know who they can trust. They don't know who's connected to the trafficker who might bring them right back. I think that that's another really scary thing. But the key to all this, is obviously awareness and making people understand what trafficking actually is, because I think there's such a divide between what we see in the media as trafficking versus what it actually looks like in real life. So, the people who don't even know that they're being trafficked, so they're not going to report, I think is like the huge essential piece to this.
True. And that's why, the domestic abuse and rape and trafficking are all connected, right? And people who are in a vulnerable situation, like you said. I think the other part that I want to talk about a bit is I've heard from victims as well, depending on how the system is set up, for this. For example, I understand the point of bail, right? You're innocent until proven guilty. Obviously, they increase the bail for people who have done worse things. But that is another issue that really upsets me every time I hear that somebody is arrested. They're out on bail the next day, especially some of these high-level traffickers have a lot of money at their disposal. And they could go finish, they could, the woman knows, or the victim knows that they have a target on their back. And from a domestic abuse situation too, that is another, that's a factor as well. It's the same thing you hear with people who are in those situations. They'll say, I would report, but I know he will get out and I'll have a target on their back. Even if they have a restraining order and all of that, we all know that a piece of paper is not going to stop some of these people. And so that is something I personally really, really struggle with when there is obvious indication that that person is a threat to somebody. And it's happened twice in the news in the last month or so in our local area. So that is something hopefully that will be addressed or changed somehow. But yeah, so that is, I think, important for people to realize. And like you said, going back to, if somebody doesn't really know that is what's happening to them, if they are in a kind of a generational cycle of this kind of a situation, I guess, that maybe their mother or their, somebody in their family has this type of lifestyle, and they think that, oh, like you're saying, that this is a way to have a roof over my head and be fed as long as I'm compliant. And
even broader, like you brought generational trauma in general, we've learned that it has a huge trickle down effect. So even if mom or dad wasn't in the specific situation, it could just be, the area that they're in, the people that they associate with, the various traumas that, were passed down from any situation that leads to this lifestyle, or this mindset that this is a lifestyle that you have to have. And that's just, you were just dealt a crap card in life, and then this is just how you have to deal with it. And I will say, from what you had mentioned about people having a lot of money and those types of people, the issue runs really, really deep. And I think the issue runs close to some of the people that would be making the decisions for these victims. And that's just like, it's daunting to us lay people. How are we going to change anything when the people in power are the people who are complicit in the issue? So, it really starts with the people, kind of moving underneath all of this stuff and forcing them to out themselves as what they are, and forcing them to change for humanity. This is not, it's just not okay. And it's too big now. And I think more and more people are realizing it. I'm so glad that people are openly talking about it. And you see so many national commercials about it, and you hear about it more and more and more. And we need to get louder for these people, because they have no idea. They have no voice, and they have no idea it's even happening to them. And fair.
And if they do, and that's the thing. It's feeling as though you're not worthy. If you are a person that is in that situation, feeling like nobody cares about people like me. And again, as we've talked about from the last time we were talking about the statistics, that when I say statistics, it's kind of like based on everybody we've talked to and their guesstimates. Because again, if it's not being reported, it's really, really hard to get a true sense. But most are not choosing this lifestyle. Most who have been imprisoned have been victims of sexual assault as a child, or a teen, or in that snowball effect. And the other thing I want to talk about a little bit too is going a bit deeper on what we've learned from a lot of the work that we've done in research, is how many times somebody who has been victimized has also been arrested. And now I know I'm kind of contradicting myself as far as them getting help versus getting arrested for something else. I'm talking about getting arrested for something else, not even related to, let's say, prostitution. But if you hear of a lot of folks who've been trafficked and victimized, and if they have had issues with the law, there are all these different things that come up. For example, I've heard stories where somebody was arrested because they had a gun illegally, let's say. And if that person was using that gun to protect herself,
Mhm.
you know, when you hear the every little step and nook and cranny, you realize if you were in her shoes, you'd be exactly in the same spot. So I've heard of stories like that. Somebody um, who had assaulted another person, who, when you go deeper, it might be because that person is working with the trafficker. You know, there's women or people who have to recruit and have to do what the trafficker says to get that person pulled back in. You know, so that's another one. Another one I heard was I don't recall if I mentioned this the last time, but a person who finally escaped her trafficker and took his car, she got arrested for stealing his car. She was trying to escape. And again, if somebody is in these situations listening to this, if you do go to the police, again, most police are trustworthy and will help. And, you know, any of the organizations that you reach out to on this topic, they know who to trust. Go to them first. If you're not sure how to navigate it, they can help you through that. But if you were to tell them all of those things, it's much easier for you to deal with it. But a lot of times, the trafficker also positions them to do things on their behalf that's illegal. Like a lot of times, selling drugs and trafficking go hand in hand. So if they're going to have the person who's being trafficked and victimized go do the drug deliveries and this and this and this, so they stay clean while they're the ones doing the dirty work, and they're the ones that might get arrested as a result. And again, you know, like you said, if they don't know if they don't know to speak open,
then them having a record just makes them untrustworthy when it comes to actually facing their trafficker, when it comes to the legal system, because that's something that can poke holes right in their story. It's like, well, you have a rap sheet a mile long. How can we trust that, you know, this is what's happening and that this person's behind it? How do we know that you're not the mastermind, or, you know, however that works? I think, again, like we just people need to come together and push lawmakers into considering these sorts of things. Like, and I'm not saying letting people off for bad behavior, but, you know, normalizing and like really, really funding alternate systems and alternate resources so that people who are in this situation aren't just chucked in jail and they don't get any help that they actually need. You know, the counseling, the crisis centers, the people who can help them reintegrate into society in a better situation and show them that you do have these other options that you can do. You don't have to go back there. Here's our safety plan. Here's how we're actually going to do this for you. Because I remember the one that we had, that event, and, you know, she spoke and I was just like in tears, because from where she was at to her being a nurse now,
yeah,
and caring for people and having an advanced degree and all of this other stuff. It's like, this is so possible for so many of these people who don't feel like they're worth it, like you had said. So there really needs to be very big systematic changes in our legislature surrounding this issue. I think that's really the only way that we're going to be able to, as a whole, as a society, as a nation, get folks aware and get folks the help that they need, instead of just tossing away the issue at every juncture. You know, you hear about the big ones, like you had mentioned the two in the news, but you know, for every two that you hear in the news, there's hundreds more happening right in your backyard. So It's just like, yeah.
Yeah, it is. It is hard, and you know, but there's hope. And I think, to your point, if we the people come together to make sure that people are paying attention to this, and again, it's like I know people are all busy. I know people do care, you know, but making sure that the more we all come together, like you said, and make noise and make sure people are listening and paying attention to this, you know, that's how change happens. Just like, you know, with the reporting for rape, for example, they said since the Me Too movement. I mean, think about how that shifted a lot of things, and you know, with the Black Lives Matter movement too, and how just awareness of some of the situations that people have. And, we're very much about unity and about working together on it and realizing how many human beings just support making sure all human beings are treated with kindness and, fairly, and all of that, have the same opportunities, and, make sure that the person has the ability to believe in themselves and to believe in their dreams.
Mm-hmm. And everybody, no matter where you start out in life, is worth the same level of dignity and respect. And we all should be recognizing that in human beings, and stopping the chain that continues to create these situations where you create the people who are being trafficked and the traffickers, because we as a society we're birthing and nursing and growing traffickers too. It's not like this weird alien ship that's just plopping traffickers in the human on Earth. It's, that trafficker also has a parent that, or a community or somebody around them. Even if it's, and unfortunately, I know that we've talked about, kind of even just like the foster system and other things of this, where you are creating people who are being trafficked and traffickers too. So there's another system that we really, really need to look into, and make sure those kids that we're shaping and forming are being shaped and formed in a way that they're going to be contributing members of society, and they're not going to harm other people, because we know that hurt people hurt people.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's such a huge issue. So as far as for, people listening or watching, you don't necessarily need to be the person who's starting a huge nonprofit or, making your entire, because we know that everybody does have our normal lives. I think all of our messaging is just, please don't turn a blind eye to this, because it's an ugly issue and we understand that. But if at any opportunity you have to even just, share some resources on Facebook, or put up a flyer, or, just any little things you can do to just kind of continue to put this issue back on top on the, with the, various social issue priorities that we have as a society, just continuing to cycle this to the top and force everyone to look at the ugly issue, because we can't bury it. It's already, they're trying to bury it themselves. So we shouldn't be allowing that.
Yeah. And I think that, this is a good segue into, talking about the demand side, because statistically, people who abuse have been abused. People who are hurt, right? And so it's reshaping and redefining what that looks like. And I know that, for example, the event that we had last year, that was a big conversation with all of the meetings, and making sure that part is incorporated into the organizations that are going into schools to teach, obviously, everybody, like, how to respect others, and how certain things are not acceptable, and how to respect someone's boundaries. And, and I know sometimes this is controversial for some people who don't understand the why behind it. When I've talked to some people about, for example, when they're really little, trying to talk about boundaries and not allowing somebody to hug you if you don't want them to hug you, or
Consent.
whatever. And it starts with that, and again, if they understood the why behind that, because it could start with, well, there's a reason why, this person doesn't want to sit on uncle's lap or kiss uncle on the lips and all that, right? I mean, and so teaching at a very young age that they own their own body, right?
Yeah, consent. I know that's a huge topic that people talk about, and teaching consent very, very early on. Like, for example, I with my two little kids, I make sure I'm, teaching. And here's the thing: I'm not teaching stranger danger. I'm not teaching strange people, because I want them to be able to recognize people who might be a stranger to them, but will help them. I'm not teaching stranger danger, strange people. I'm teaching strange behavior, because again, this issue has uncovered that a lot of lot of people who end up in these abuse situations are known to that person. So I don't, not that I'm trying to make them not trust family members or be leery of family members, but I want them to be able to recognize strange behavior. For example, there should be no adult telling you to keep a secret from me.
Right.
I mean, I understand, grandma's planning a surprise party for mom. That wouldn't be a strange behavior.
Mm-hmm.
Strange behavior would be something different that they're asking you to keep a secret from me. And so like my kids will know that. So they'll, and then I'm also raising two little boys. And I know in this society, it's, going to college or some gray areas and drinking and parties and whatever. I'm raising them to be absolutely respectful of people's boundaries. And the only yes that means yes is an enthusiastic yes.
Mm-hmm.
So if somebody doesn't if they say no or okay, man, that's not consent. That's coercion. And I don't want to be growing, traffickers or abusers or anybody that would be, even just like a toxic boyfriend. I don't want that for my kids, and I know nobody does. So yeah, consent is a huge thing.
Yeah. And I'm grateful. I mean, I have daughters, and so I'm grateful that for people who are teaching their sons that. And there's been situations where there's been good young men who step in to look out for others. And again, it's not just females. We know that boys and LGBTQ community, and but anybody who is in need, and everybody's should be safe, and yeah, stepping in and doing the right thing, really is what it comes down to. So I know that is more of an emphasis and more of a push, and that is why. And and the whole thing going back to just being a nice little girl and whatever, but the threats. And I think the other thing too that I'm just going to mention that I think is important to talk to kids about is, if somebody is telling you or threatening, if you tell, I'm going to hurt your parents or your sister or whatever, that's super, super scary. But they have to understand that you have to tell your family. They're not going to, it's threats that they share. And it's more important to be honest and share, with your family, if that is what somebody is doing. And the other thing that I would teach my girls too is, and this is something I think the guys need to listen to. And I guess I'm saying female, male, but just to make it simple, is men have to be aware also of what they are asking of somebody who they have power over, not getting them in a room alone, making sure that they are aware and cognizant of the fact that if there is a girl or a teenage girl or whatever person alone, you probably just don't want to be engaging with them, like being overly engaging with them, because because it's the type of person.
It's just ingrained in our heads. And I actually saw a TikTok the other day, and I didn't like the idea, but I wondered why it was an idea. This woman had mentioned that men should have a curfew just so that women can go walk alone at night or go for walks or go out and not feel unsafe. And I was like, well, why is that even a suggestion? Well, it's because there is a general, and you had said, to the female male thing, to make it simple. It's not even, that's just the statistics of it. That's what's happening. And it is unfortunate. So, I think we can't stop those behaviors. We just have to stop the systems that are creating those types of people. So getting young men support early on, destigmatizing mental health help, destigmatizing different things, to allow young men to have the support that they need, so they don't resort to these different things, or they don't think that certain behaviors are appropriate. And same thing for young women.
Having strong male mentors, that this is how you treat your girlfriend, this is how you or the other, I remember a conversation. So we talked about the fact that I'm obviously an older generation, and with the Me Too movement, for example, I realized as a woman how much women at my age growing, like how much was just, that's just how it is, and like even watching some old shows and the sexual innuendos and the, and how women just really had to, we often just would laugh it off.
Yeah.
We were taught to laugh it off rather than in your face, because then you'd be a bee and blah, 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 and having to navigate that. And then even my mother on the, in her generation, I don't know if she would appreciate me sharing this, but I mean, she dealt with her own stuff too. And it's just like, that's where, again, you want the good people doing the right thing and standing up to somebody like that to say, hey, leave her alone, buddy. And it's not a matter of let's figure out how far we can go and get her drunk and, slip her something or whatever. Oh, it's just, it's wrong, period. But, talking again about the demand side of things, I'd like to share a little bit more about some of the things that I know we learned along the way. And if people go through thinking, people who are in a certain prostitutes, let's say, if they think that, okay, they're choosing that lifestyle, they don't realize how the large percentage of them who have been forced into it in the first place. And I've heard where that education, where a man who would be saying, I thought I was hiring this person for this purpose, and I didn't realize that this person may have been forced into it. It's like, I would not, like a good man would say, I'm re-looking at all of that now and realizing that there's a very high likelihood that this person I think that, is in the sex industry is choosing that.
And I like that you said sex industry, because I know that we identified that it's not just like prostitution and that
I was trying to come up with that. Yeah.
No, yeah, it's complete. It's
Right.
it's sex workers in general, porn stars, like all this stuff that looks like it's choice. And for some people, if it is 100% their choice, then, you do you, but the vast majority, it's not choice, it's coercion. And it's,
yeah.
We're complicit in the issue every time you open that certain site or, hire that escort for the night.
Yeah, it's just an eye opener. And, I know again that what they're seeking is good men to stand up to and educate the boys, educate the other men. And I always say someone is going to be the strongest in a room. Someone's going to be the strongest in an industry or in a business or in whatever. Be the strongest person for good and stand up for what is right, and make sure that you realize that, and look at it too, like this could be my sister or my daughter or whoever, somebody to humanize that person. It's not just this person who doesn't matter, who can be discarded alongside the road. Think about that person's history. And that person, like you said, we're all born exactly equal and perfect, and we're not harmed, and then as we go through life, obviously the more somebody has been through trauma, that impacts their life a lot and how they feel about themselves. So is there anything we missed on that? We wanted to share a little bit more about some of the specific stories that we had heard.
Just looking at my notes here. No, I don't think so. I mean, if you want to segue into like the
So a lot of people have been asking about the different various stories, and I think that it's helpful to hear the stories in order to wrap your head around the reality, right? And just think through those little things that could make a big difference. So I'm just going to talk about one in particular right now who shared that she was, and this is somebody that lives in Wisconsin, and she shared that she was actually out at a bar, and she woke up in I think it was Atlanta. I can't remember what state she woke up, but she was,
Same state, different city.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
if it's the one I'm remembering.
yeah. And so
Was told she was going on a plane. Yeah.
what was that?
And then was told she was going on the plane to Atlanta.
Oh, was that a different one? I'm thinking of the one that basically was out until she woke up in a hotel room. Is that the same one?
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
So
so
they,
she, yeah, she woke up in a hotel room. She was being trafficked from that hotel room for 3 months straight, and I can't remember if she was actually. Sometimes they move around to different hotels, but for 3 months, and there was finally a drug bust, and that's when she was saved. And the part that so obviously what all happened is just so traumatic and so horrible, and I won't get into the gory details because it's too much. But then once she was saved, the police officer um, didn't know how to handle the situation. I mean, luckily they didn't arrest her. They realized that she was a victim there. But the police officer didn't really know how to handle it, asked her where her family was or where she was from. She said Wisconsin. She didn't have anything. She didn't have her. That's the other thing too, is they take away all of your identification. So she didn't have any identification with her. The traffickers took away the identification. So she had no money. She had no phone. She had no identification, but she was somehow to try to figure out her way back to Wisconsin. And it's like, I guess in my mind, you think about the movies and you think about, oh, someone's rescued and they are swept back into the arms of their loved ones and everything falls into place. I mean, that's just the beginning. She had to find a way. And I think they gave her, or somebody she got in contact with from Wisconsin gave her a bus ticket. And so she had to find out how to get to the bus station. She was battered, she was abused, she was drugged, and she had to try to figure out how to get from where she was to the bus station. And I vividly remember her talking about how she was asking the police to help, and then he said, well, I'll drop you off. He dropped her off in the corner. She was so disoriented, and anybody seeing her on the street would think that she was clearly someone on drugs, without realizing this woman had just come through this traumatic, horrible situation. And she ended up going to a coffee shop to just sit and just try to gather her thoughts and just to sit. And luckily, thank God, some woman, older woman, asked her if she needed help and got her to the bus station. But it was just, again, just the thinking about all of the above, and then thinking how this woman then had to figure life out after all of that without any support, any counseling, any help, because there wasn't really anything at the time. So anyway, that was the one that stood out. Did I miss any details of hers?
No, but I believe because she was the one that spoke at the event, correct?
No, this is a different
that was
one.
a different one. Okay. Oh, we had the Zoom meeting with this person. Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I mean, I think that's it's incredibly scary that things can change for someone so quickly. She was having fun. And then all of a sudden it is gone. And for years, it's just, it's really, and looking that person in the face while they tell you that story, I think that's even more powerful. And I would challenge, again, it's an ugly issue that people don't want to hear about or look at, but I would challenge everybody out there to seek out those stories and to look those people in the face, not necessarily in person, but there's plenty of people who share on YouTube who, there's various events everywhere where there are survivors speaking out and saying what happened to them, just so people in similar situations can know, or people who are close to similar situations can know what that looks like and how to intervene and how to help. Yeah, I mean, her story and all the other ones we heard was just so, it changes the way you interact in normal life, like it did for me. I'm very aware of things in normal life now. I look for things differently. I notice people differently. But I think that's something that we all need to do, is be aware, because we have to be the ones to help. So
Yeah, yeah. Well, and then also at the event, the one that you had mentioned, as far as how she's a nurse now, and how, thank God, she is where she is. And I know everybody who listened to her story, as difficult as it was for her to share it, just wanted to scoop her up and just love on her. And um, but that was very hard for her to share her story. And in her case, she was raised in a family, a Catholic family, who had a dad who was very strict, and I believe that there was some, definitely some control going on there with the father and the mother and the kids. And she had shared how she didn't get a lot of attention from boys because she was a little heavier, she said. And so the first time this guy gave her some attention and swept her off her feet and made her feel pretty, she trusted him, she loved him, she believed him, and then he pulled her into the trafficking, and she couldn't get out, and and just feeling very used and abused, and like she had no other option, and how he pulled her away from her family and all of that. um yeah, that
Yeah.
was really, really difficult to hear. Is there a particular part of what her story was that stood out to you?
I mean, not in particular, aside from just how scary and how real the issue is. And if you kind of put yourself in that situation, it, like I said, just changes the way that you interact with real life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. And I think that the last story was somebody too who, in her case, she was from Wisconsin also, and she was sharing. And I can't remember if you were in on this meeting with her or not, but she was sharing how it was kind of a lifestyle situation that she got pulled into, with her peer group, and kind of a drinking and drugs and let's all have fun kind of situation where she had been drugged, she had been not herself, and it was more normalized. I think is the situation with her, is she was kind of pulled into this mentality, and that was kind of, she would say, in a pop culture R. Kelly kind of mentality of, hey, this is just how it is. And
Grooming.
what's that?
Grooming.
Grooming, yeah. And how hard it was to get out of that, and how the next guy would sweep in and act like he was going to, make sure she was treated better and take care of her and all of those things. Yeah.
There's so many different ways that people are trafficked, and we could talk for 5 hours about the different situations that are trafficking, when people don't think or know or aware that it is trafficking.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think the media they're doing better, but I think there's a I shouldn't say a bad job, but mischaracterizes, or like maybe just shows one side, the most severe, snatching off the street, which does happen. So obviously, please be aware of your surroundings when you're out, because we talk to those people. But there's also, people close to you, people people that you love, and maybe it's just you think it's a toxic boyfriend, and maybe you're actually being trafficked. It can happen so fast, and in certain situations, but then it can also be the gradual kind of pull you in sort of thing. So,
well, and and it's not to really freak people out, but my conversations with the police and FBI, and hearing from the voices of real people. Again, it's there are these patches that somebody can put on your skin and drug you, so like if somebody's in a bar. The other thing I had heard from, I'm not going to mention the university, but there was a university that somebody had got a hold of. It was like a pinprick type of thing that they would hug the girls when they would come in. It was a frat house. And this is, obviously a little different than a trafficking situation, but the methods are the same. But just she felt a little prick. And this is actually from somebody that I've talked to. And then that's the last thing she remembered. So in terms of the being drugged. So, yeah.
I know there's a lot of companies, startup companies, smaller companies that are trying to do everything they can to help with some of those types of situations. I know there's like a nail polish company that you can wear the nail polish and put your finger in a drink and see if it's drugged, and various things like that. I think continuing to champion those types of things, support those types of organizations, utilize those products, because it's really crappy that these people are so desperate to do these things and to snatch these people and to get, people in these trafficking situations, that they're so far ahead of us, they're 10 steps ahead of us with their tactics. Because, once we uncover a new tactic, they've already got 10 more in the pocket that they can do. So,
yeah. And there's
to be
on the
aware.
dark web, they do their training. They actually train people on how to do this.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I think, that will wrap us up today. I'm just kind of looking through our notes to see if there's anything else. But, I guess, as far as the how to help, again, we talked about this the last time. But if you are an organization who wants to kind of be a safe space employer, or if you have access, housing is a huge, huge, huge issue in terms of the vulnerability of the population. So we need to make sure that anybody who, again, is a landlord or has access to property and things like that, they can be involved and they're very needed. So those things are important. And, again, I'm just gonna pull up the hotline number again, because it is important to just keep this handy. And we talked about this a bit the last time, but if you know, or if you suspect there might be a situation that somebody's being trafficked and you're not sure what to do about it, it's really, really important to report it. And again, it doesn't matter, if you're wrong or not, to let them figure that out. The people who are professionals figure it out, because maybe it is a situation where there's been other reports and they can add them all up and make an arrest. But the National Human Trafficking Hotline number is 888-373-7888. And then you can also text HELP to 233-733. 233-733. It's a National Human Trafficking Hotline, but never hesitate to call that number if you yourself are in a situation, if you see a situation, to report it. They are connected across the country to get help where you need it based on what you're looking for too. So if you're, they're not going to push you into reporting it. They're going to help you where you're at and figure out what that looks like for you.
Yeah. And then also, head over to doseofunity.com/take action. We do have a trafficking page with other resources, including the hotline number on there. So that's a good thing to review and share, with other people, since there's a lot of good information. And since these issues are so connected, our Take Action page also has mental health and addiction resources as well. If you have someone close to you who might be kind of in the thick of all of this, or might, not realize that they're in a trafficking situation, good starting point is mental health help, addiction help, kind of getting them in a better mindset, and then helping them, get out of that situation. I think those foundational things are important too. So.
Yeah, exactly. Well, good. Well, thank you everybody for listening and for watching, and we will wrap things up. And again, follow us. If you can, you follow us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and then you can be alerted to what's coming up with our next podcast. So thanks again, and take care.
Bye.